Hey everyone, welcome to the live stream today. I just realized I hadn't hit the go live button, so that's always good when that happens. Uh, let's see. I wanted to today. This is episode 13 of the Blackbird Chronicles, and I chose a couple of topics today because to go through because they keep coming up in the questions, and I constantly am getting questions on this. First one is around Gen 4 versus Gen 5 SSDs. A lot of marketing around this. I do have a video on this. However, I think it's important just to, I extracted out a couple of key points that I want to talk to the Blackbird PC Tech audience about today. And then in addition to that, a question or a topic that comes up over and over again. I mean, I don't know how many times a day I get questions around VRAM and how important it is. And I think this is a topic that has been super hyped for certain content creators have created quite a lot of hype around this. So instead of, focusing in on the hype, I figure let's look at the data and then you can decide for yourself of how important or not important you think VRAM is as we move forward. And it also gets linked to longevity too. So something I see a lot of people talk about is future proofing. And future proofing in PC tech is nonsensical. It just doesn't, as soon as you buy something, it'll be outdated. And so as an objective, that's somewhat flawed. I think that it's more important to focus around your experience over the next 1 to 2 years. Trying to future proof will cost a lot of money, but it's not even the fact that it costs a lot of money. The objective is somewhat flawed, in my opinion. So anyway, let's jump in here let's first talk about something that has just come out as I was wrapping up my video on memory. I saw a new AGESA had just come out. This wasn't too long ago. I think it was, now I may get this wrong, but it's AGESA 1.2.3.0F or something like that. But what that's done is it's given support to AMD AM5 motherboards with for RAM with 64 gigabytes per DIMM. So it's dual rank, so that's 64-bit both sides. And so now you can put and populate on your motherboard 256 gigabytes of RAM. Now, as you could, and so a couple of things. One, don't try and buy two separate kits and do this. And if you do, you have to loosen your timings. And if you do buy a quad kit like this, not quad, that's the wrong terminology, 4 DIMMs like this, because that quad means something else, quad memory channels. But it will set you back a lot. So this is from Newegg yesterday. So a kit of 4 times 64 is $800. So a couple of things. If you're gaming, this is completely pointless. I'm going to show you that in a moment. Really, this only makes sense if you're doing a professional application that needs this. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Do not waste your money on this much RAM. If you're not doing rendering or some other professional application like training models, even then you're probably going to use your VRAM more than your system RAM. So just, I know it's like the hype, oh, I want to populate all of the DIMMs on my motherboard. It still doesn't make sense, right? So just keep that in mind. But I did want to bring it to your attention because now that support has increased. And so what does that mean? This will be in my video towards the end of next week, but I just wanted to share it with you. So if you take, this is for DDR5 6000 at 1080p so that you're loading up the CPU and loading up the system memory as much as possible. It's with a 9950 X3D, so that it is a 3D V-cache CPU. And now if you look at the baseline, which is DDR5 6000 CL30, 32 gigabyte kit, so that's single rank, and an FCLK of 2000. this is in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, which is pretty intensive on system RAM. So if you drop the latency, there's a cache latency by 4, you get a small improvement. We've known that for a while, that you'll get some improvement if you tighten the timings. The rest of the primary timings are the same though, just bear that in mind. Now, if you go to a dual rank kit where you typically pick up a little bit of performance, so this one is 232GB modules. And by the way, I'm using an Apex board, and an Apex board only has 2 DIMMs. So bear that in mind, right? So I'm fully populating the DIMMs, but there's only 2 DIMMs. So each DIMM in this example of DDR5 6000 CL30, 2 32GB DIMMs, so they're dual rank, same FCLK of 2000. You pick up a little bit of performance over the baseline as well. Not a huge amount. But look what happens when you try to run a high capacity kit, one of the new high capacity kits. I purchased this from Newegg last week just so that I could test it. One of the so first, it will run in EXPO 1 mode stable. So that's great news. But in order to achieve that, they've loosened the timings, which makes sense. So instead of running at, see, this dual rank 64GB kit of CL30, 36, 36, 96, it's running at, and I dropped this, by the way, I tightened these timings, CL32, 42, 42, 96. Those primary timings have an impact on performance, and you'll see that here. So compared to the baseline CL30 kit of 32GB of CL30, you're dropping your 1% lows by around 6%. Not huge, but this proves the point not to go and buy a huge amount of RAM just because you can. It will actually hurt your gaming performance. So that's kind of my thing to you, not to go and do that. All right. So hey Cody. Hey, by the way, I do want to do a thank you to everyone that's come on the channel, watched a video, participated in a live stream, liked, left a comment, become a member, joined our Skool community. Thank you so much. A couple of days ago, we hit 25,000 members, and I stopped for a minute to really think about just how grateful I am for this community, and kind of think through what that experience was like over 2 years. Because I started nearly 2 years ago. It was Thanksgiving Day in 2023. And I also looked at what was the subscription count for the channel a year ago today, and it was 3,300. So that's been some amazing growth, and it really is all attributable to you, the audience, and embracing the content and the channel, and I really do appreciate that. And I also thought back to just how difficult it is as a viewer to subscribe to a channel when there's no subscribers. So when I had 50 subscribers on the channel, it's this social proof of, why would I subscribe to this guy? Who the hell is he, right? And so I really do appreciate you for doing that, and giving it a chance. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. So thank you, Cody, for bringing that up. I appreciate that. It means the world to me. And I put a community post on the channel so you can read through kind of my thoughts. I was able to sit down and just kind of take stock and think through that journey, and it's been pretty cool. So thank you so much. So thank you for bringing that up, and I appreciate you guys. Tony and Dare D, appreciate you. Hoplite, good to see you, buddy. Thank you for joining. It really makes a difference. So with that being said, the memory video, I put a small sneak peek on a community post. I filmed it this morning. All of the benchmarks are in the Skool community. So if you can't wait until Friday, which is when I'm hoping to get the video up, if there's some kind of weird delay, it'll be Saturday, but I'm reasonably confident it'll be Friday. That's when the video is coming out. There is a lot of data. I did extensive testing, and I usually do extensive testing, but this was 2 weeks of testing and rechecking. So there's a lot of data there, and I broke it down a little differently. So I didn't just bombard you with all the benchmarks. I broke it down to sections, where I had a section, and then I provided my thoughts, and then a section and thoughts. And so it should be kind of easy to follow that way. And but yeah, it was very, very interesting. And I find that when you test and you're a little surprised by the results, that's a good thing. That means that you weren't biased, or at least you might have been biased, but you didn't intentionally bias the results. So that's good. But anyway, so that should be out next week. And I'm actually already started working on the video after that, which is going to be a GPU video, pretty cool. So I'll keep that under wraps. I'll do a community post on that a little later this week. So, okay. Gen 4 versus Gen 5 SSDs. This is the video if you're interested. So I did this a year ago, actually. Nothing's changed. Motherboards have changed a little. The support for Gen 5 has changed a little. Okay, so I'll back up. Some things have changed. Support for Gen 5 SSDs has improved. So that's number one. Core Ultra processors and the motherboards now support it kind of natively and not through the chipset. AM5 has always supported it. That support's still the same. Gen 5 M.2 SSDs have, they're onto the second generation controller, which is helped to lower the temperatures. That was one of their big problems. They were so fast, they would get so hot, and the performance would drop. So there has been some things that have improved that way, and also the price has dropped considerably for Gen 5 drives, and that is really what all of this comes down to, is how much, right? Let's see. So first thing first, running Crystal Disk Mark, and you can see that clear, and this is a Crucial T705 Gen 5 2 terabyte SSD versus a Crucial T500 Gen 4 2 terabyte SSD. So I tried to keep it apples to apples as much as possible. I didn't want to use a different controller on one versus the other. So this is both Micron drives, both from Crucial. You can see the read-write performance. I mean, if you look at sequential reads, the Gen 5 drive is double the Gen 4 drive. Same thing on write, same thing on random 4K reads. Well, not double. And then on random 4K writes, it's very close. Of particular interest are the temperatures of the SSDs while doing this, the max temperatures they hit. The Gen 4 SSD hit 54 degrees Celsius, while the Gen 5 SSD hit 78 degrees Celsius. Now, these aren't temperatures you should be really concerned about, but a 24-degree difference in temperature over time. Now, this is in an open bench table, in a case where you've got heat coming from the GPU and the CPU, really baking that SSD. That's why active cooling for Gen 5 SSDs is a thing, but that's a big difference. So there better be a performance benefit to using a Gen 5 M.2 SSD. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense, right? So just keep that in mind. 24 degrees, it's not 2 degrees. 24 degrees Celsius is huge, right? So, and that was also kind of a proof point that I wanted to make sure by running Crystal Disk Mark that I hadn't somehow hampered the performance of the Gen 5 drive, because you'll see the results in a moment if you haven't seen this video, right? Okay, let's see. Okay, so 3D Mark has a storage benchmark, and what's interesting about this storage benchmark is that when you run this benchmark, it's a synthetic benchmark, but what it does for the access time, which is load time essentially, it runs a whole bunch of games and measures the access time. Now, the access time, or a load time, is measured in microseconds. So one of the things that bugs me is when I get people say, you didn't measure the load times for the Gen 5 versus Gen 4 SSD. And you're like, that's correct. What I would love to ask you is, do you think you could hold a stopwatch and be accurate to the microsecond level? Because the answer is there's no way. You can't react fast enough to measure that accurately. So when you see channels that show the difference between a Gen 4, Gen 5 SSD, and they show load times that they've measured manually, it is garbage. I mean, just their reaction time isn't fast enough to measure that accurately. So that's why this is a great storage benchmark. So if you're interested, you can run it through 3D Mark, because it does an accurate measurement of load time. And so you can see, as you would expect, that the load time for Gen 5 SSD is significantly lower, 25% lower. I think that's what that is roughly, than the Gen 4 SSD. So that's a good thing. However, we're talking microseconds. So you're not really going to notice that difference in real life when you're playing a game, right? I don't know if that's real life, but when you're playing a game, you're not really going to notice. Again, we're not comparing hard drives to SSDs. We're comparing two very high performing M.2 SSDs, a Gen 4 and a Gen 5. That's why, yes, there is a benefit, but it's not really practical. So then the question may be, and I'm ignoring professional workloads here because there are definitely professional workloads that will benefit from this, no question. But these drives are marketed towards gamers. And I show that in the video. Like, there's lots of marketing. Hey, if you want to compete, get a Gen 5 drive, right? You're a loser if you don't get a Gen 5 drive, right? You have to have a Gen 5 SSD. So how does it actually compare in gaming? And the reality is that there's not a heck of a lot of difference. This is Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And I looked at a low end, 1080p low end, all the way up to 4K Ultra. Comparing the two, they are within margin of error on virtually everything. 1% lower is an average. Absolutely no difference, right? Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. This was fascinating, and I checked this multiple times. The Gen 4 drive actually produced higher performance than your Gen 5 drive. Now, it's possible that that's because the drive got warm, the Gen 5 drive got warm, and when a Gen 5 SSD or any SSD gets too warm, it'll do what graphics cards and other things does. It slows down. So that may have been the case. So I have to dig into that more. But I did repeat this multiple times. This is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. I did this a while ago, so Black Ops 6 wasn't out at that time. Same thing anyway. It doesn't really matter. And then over 11 games, which is what I tested for that video, this is what you see. The Gen 4 SSD at 1080p was slightly faster. At 1440p was slightly faster in the average, slightly slower in the 1% lows, and same thing at 4K. Slightly slower in the 1% lows, slightly faster. That's not a meaningful difference. Anything under 3% is not really meaningful. It can be run to run other things. So there is effectively zero difference in gaming between a Gen 4 and a Gen 5 SSD. Now, you may already know that, but when I published this video, I got attacked for the first few days of people saying, obviously people that have bought Gen 5 SSDs, and by the way, I was one of them. I got sucked into this. I bought a whole bunch of Gen 5 SSDs and before I tested them. And I'm surprised that I didn't do more testing. It was just ridiculous. But I got sucked into the marketing. We all get sucked into the marketing. So you're not an idiot to have bought a Gen 5 SSD for gaming. I did it, right? I mean, I don't think I'm an idiot, right? So just keep that in mind. This is really bad false marketing. And all of the companies do this to try and push a product that doesn't provide any benefit in gaming. By the way, this is why my test bench still uses Gen 4 SSD, because there is zero benefit in gaming, right? And I looked at a whole bunch of different things, right? But there is absolutely no benefit. So I want to be clear about this, right? Absolutely no benefit to doing this. If you look at value, however, now keep in mind, this is as of, well, I can't read that date. It's too small. Let's see. 6/13/2024. So a year ago, the value is the Gen 4 SSD delivers twice the value at 1080p and about twice the value at 4K as a Gen 5 drive. Now, they've gotten cheaper since then, but so have kind of Gen 4 SSDs. So that gap will have narrowed a little, but the performance is the same. Why would you pay more? In fact, if you want to pay more, I would highly recommend getting a much bigger drive, a 4TB drive, a Gen 4 4TB drive, or even a Gen 4 8TB drive. That would make much more sense. So, this is kind of my civic duty to let you know not to get sucked into the marketing around Gen 5 drives. There's another issue as well, and then I'll take a look through the questions. But this is a place where you have to be very careful and read your motherboard manual. So I forget, what is this one for? This is for an X670E motherboard. So at the time, so it's the same kind of thing, X870E. And when you look at it, find the page that talks about M.2 drives, or really your GPU, the way the PCIe X16 1 and 2 slots are arranged. And you'll see something that says, if single slot description, so slot 1, PCIe X16 1, if that's populated just by itself and the second slot is not populated, that will run at X16, so full bandwidth. If both of those slots are populated, the cards will run in X8 mode, right? So half that bandwidth. So that's kind of step one. But you got to read these fine print underneath of it. When M.2_2 is enabled, PCIe X16 1, slot 1, will run at X8, and PCIe X16 2 will run at X4. So if you were to populate a Gen 5 drive in M.2_2, you will halve the bandwidth of your GPU. Now, it's not going to be a huge problem, but it will lower your performance. So you have to keep that in mind. In fact, Z790 boards were even worse. So you'll see that here. M.2_1 shares bandwidth with PCIe 16_2. When M.2_1 is occupied with SSD device, slot 2 will be completely disabled, and slot 1 will run in X8 only. So you really have to be cognizant of what you're doing when you populate SSDs on your motherboard, even to this day, because there's certain lanes, PCIe lanes, that come from your CPU, and there's certain lanes that come from your chipset on your motherboard. Typically, the chipset, particularly on the last generation boards, was running in PCIe Gen 4. So if you got a PCIe Gen 5 SSD and put it in there, it'll only run at PCIe Gen 4 anyway. And then on the slots that did run at PCIe Gen 5, you ended up sharing bandwidth with the GPU, which I'm pretty sure most people didn't want to do. And I will guarantee you that a lot of people that have built their computers are doing this and not realizing that they're hurting their performance. For zero gain in gaming performance, to have the bragging rights of using a Gen 5 M.2 SSD, it simply doesn't make sense. So with that said, let me take a quick look at the chat. So Tony, that's what I learned about Asus boards when I was upgrading, because I use a lot of M.2s. Yeah, and this is where some of the higher cost boards actually do have a benefit, because they have additional lanes and they have additional slots. So Asus has the DIMM.2 card, which is awesome. You can populate that with SSDs and it will not impact the performance of your GPU. So that's one of the reasons that Asus has an advantage there. Let's see. Scott said, it's good to be a member. Scott, welcome, buddy, and it's great to have you here. Really appreciate it. John said, I'm running 32 gigabytes of 6000 CL28 SK Hynix kit, which is great. Asus Tweak, again, great. FCLK 2100 and Titan Timings, my best bet. Well, first of all, wait and see the video on Friday. So I'll do that plug. In particular, I dig into detail around FCLK. I do think that, yeah, you could try CL26. What I would recommend is, I don't know what brand this is, but it's probably, I don't know, if I was to guess, a G-Skill kit. What I would do is actually look on the G-Skill website, if it's a G-Skill kit, and look for a kit of 6000 CL26 and look at those timings. Typically, it's just the CAS latency that's lowered and the rest of the primary timings are the same, but just make sure the voltage is the same. And then just try running at CL26 and seeing if it's stable. Asus Tweak profile is the best profile you can run if you've got an Asus board. It will result in maximum highest performance. However, it might not be stable. And then the other thing, FCLK, I have to talk a little bit more about. I have a visitor.
Hello, Daddy.
Hi. Hi. I'm in the middle of a thing. Can you close my door?
Livestream?
Yes.
Oh.
Can you close my door?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sorry about that. Let's see. So the tightening of the timings is the key. FCLK, I'm going to talk about it more in the video on Friday. I'll actually show the data and a sweep of FCLK for each of the different kind of RAM kits that you would consider if you've got an AM5 board. And so that'll help you. It's hard to, it's easier to explain with a graphic, so it's hard to explain. But yeah, I mean, what you're doing is right. Again, the ASUS tweak profile is the way to go. If that's not stable and you can't get it stable, backing off to the EXPO 1 would be the next best. The other thing to consider is if you're not stable, and you can usually tell by running Kahu if you kind of get an error after, I don't know, you're at 100% coverage, something like that. You can typically add a little bit of VDD and VDDQ, a little bit of voltage. I wouldn't go over 1.5 volts for sure. Typically, you want to stay around the 1.45. So you can add 0.01 volts, increments of 0.01 volts, and then just check the stability again, right? In ASUS boards, you typically have to go and enable higher voltages, which is just above the VDD and VDDQ to accomplish that. By the way, the changing VDD and VDDQ you can do on any board, right? And that's a way to help giving your memory a little bit more voltage is a way to get it stable. And one thing to be aware of is when I just was doing all of my extensive memory testing, my DDR5 6400 kit was not stable at EXPO 1 timings in my system. And this was an Apex 2DIMM, very expensive motherboard with a 9950 X3D. It was not stable, which I was very surprised about. I had to increase the voltage from 1.4, which was the stock for that kit, to 1.45 to get that kit stable, which was very surprising to me. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Tony was saying that your boot drive is on a Gen 3 drive. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I really got to take the time to migrate to a Gen 5. I don't think you'll really notice a difference having your boot drive Gen 5. I would still get a Gen 4. Like I typically get a smaller capacity drive for my boot drive, say a 1 terabyte drive, put Windows on that, not a heck of a lot of other things, and then have a 4 terabyte SSD for games and other things. That's typically how I set up my PCs when I build them. Let's see. What else we got? Yeah, I appreciate some of the positive comments, Cody, and welcome on board, Jesse, and welcome on aboard, Daddy. It's great to have you as part of the channel membership. And by the way, over time, I'm going to be enhancing and doing more things with the membership. And don't forget, I've got a giveaway coming up. So if you remember, you get extra tickets in the giveaway. I'll talk about that towards the end. All right, let's change topics. So this is an interesting topic, and this comes up even more than the SSD discussion. Is GPU VRAM really important? Now you'll get, like, people swear on their life that this is the most important thing for PCs, is having enough VRAM. And you've got channels like Hardware Unboxed that push the narrative that not having enough VRAM is the end of the world. So before I go through the data, and if you try and take out the emotions, here's my high-level thought around GPU VRAM. You have to put VRAM in the context of your actual GPU chip as well. So the chip, which is the cores of the GPU that do all the computations, that is arguably the most important thing on your GPU. If that's not powerful enough to process the tasks like games that you want to process, there is nothing you can do. I mean, nothing you can do. You will have to upgrade your GPU. the VRAM is supportive of that GPU. So when you're buying a GPU, you really want to match as much as you can the performance of the GPU with the memory so that they're complementary and it's balanced. There's no value in, I'm just going to use an extreme example of say if NVIDIA was to make a 50-50 with 24 gigabytes of VRAM, makes 0 sense because you will not be able to run your games at resolutions or settings that are even close to using up the VRAM. So that would be an extremely unbalanced design. And you could go the other way and you could say, imagine NVIDIA made a 5090 with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Extremely unbalanced, right? So that you have to keep that in mind when you talk about VRAM. VRAM is not the most important thing when it comes to GPUs. The GPU core is the most important thing. It's what does all the computations. It's like saying that in your PC, the amount of system RAM you have is more important than the CPU. That's what the narrative from Hardware Unboxed comes down to. And it's absolute garbage, right? So that's my high level thoughts around this. And I try and express those opinions within this video, but by showing data and letting the data lead to those opinions, right? Or lead to that recommendation or observation even, right? You know, opinions are, everyone has one, right? And it's not data. So, but that's my thoughts based on a lot of testing. So let's dig in a little bit, right? So here's again, you can, if you haven't watched this video, check it out. It hasn't gotten a lot of views, and which I was surprised about because it's maybe the thing I don't do very well is I don't make clickbait titles. So, you know, maybe I should have retitled this, "It's the end of the world. If you don't do this, you're not gonna," yeah, anyway, I'm joking. I'm not gonna do that. But check it out if you haven't seen it. So here's some of the data from that video. So Cyberpunk 2077, this is RT Ultra, so ray tracing on, frame gen off, 1080p to 4K. And so in typical fashion, the orange is the 1% lows and then the blue is the average FPS. But I also added in this video green bars, which depict the total VRAM usage as a percentage of the total. So no, not as a percentage of the total. The length of the bar is the maximum VRAM capacity. So for this test, I tested two identical GPUs, 4060 Ti with 8 gigabytes of VRAM and a 4060 Ti with 16. Now, the thing I couldn't control is silicon quality. So one of these GPUs may have had slightly better silicon quality. It's not really going to impact the results much because I didn't overclock them. I simply ran them at default clocks. So that shouldn't really impact. But again, identical GPU cores, right? It's the same chip on both, but with different amounts of VRAM to try and isolate the impact of VRAM. And so the length of this bar, so it says 10.48. I think I estimated that as a length of 16. So 7.67 is about half. So maybe the length of the bar is somewhere here, something like that. They're correct relative to each other. I honestly don't recall how I did that. But that being said, at 4K, the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte card used 10.5 gigabytes. The 8 gigabyte card used 7.67. So it was clearly hitting a limit. What's fascinating to me is that it only benefited by around 6% in average FPS. Now, 1% lows, there was a massive benefit of 30%. So clearly not having enough VRAM here really did hurt your performance because that is noticeable. Going from, I guess, 19 to 25 is a noticeable difference that in 1% lows is a very noticeable difference. What's fascinating also is at 1080p, there was basically no difference. Even though the 16 gigabyte card used significantly more VRAM, it wasn't noticeable because the GPU wasn't loaded. Again, this is why understanding how the GPU and CPU is loaded is very important. Now, you wouldn't buy a 4060 Ti to game at 4K. I know that. But these were the only two cards at the time. Well, there was an AMD, what was it, 7600 that I could do as well. But these were the cards that I got to choose from. There is no 4090 that has half the VRAM, right? And so I plan to redo these tests with 5060 Ti and a 9060 XT, I think has the 8 and 16 gig models, to see if things have changed. But I think this is interesting and kind of shows you that in this instance, 8 gigabytes of VRAM was really limiting your performance, right? Again, because I've taken the GPU off the table. Here's another example in Microsoft Flight Simulator where, again, you're hitting the VRAM limit for the 8 gig card, and there is a significant, massive increase in performance for the 16 gigabyte card. So now again, you don't need 16 gigabytes. You can see that you're capping out around 12 gigabytes at 4K. Not that you would use these for 4K. All right, so at 1440p, you're capping out around 10, but clearly 8 isn't enough, and it's really hurting your performance. Now, in Formula One 2024, you get another situation where you're hitting your VRAM limit on the 4060 Ti 8 gig model, but it's not really killing your performance. It's hurting, but it's not destroying it. And this is kind of I wanted to bring this up because it shows you that you're not stuck when you have 8 gigabytes of VRAM. You can still game. It's not as good as if you had more, but you can definitely still game and enjoy yourself at 1440p, running at 47. I mean, in this instance, the 8 gigabyte card, for some unknown reason, is higher than the 16 gigabyte card. And again, I check these, and same thing at 1080p. And that's probably some offloading to the CPU here that's starting to kick in. But again, you can game effectively. And Call of Duty Black Ops 6, here's another situation where when you have the VRAM available, it will use it, but it doesn't generate a massive change in performance, at least at the higher end when the GPU is heavily loaded. Now, when the CPU is loaded, which is interesting, more heavily, it does benefit the higher VRAM card, right? You can see in the 1% lows. Average FPS doesn't really take a hit. And if you've noticed in all of these, the average FPS in general isn't really getting hit so much. It's the 1% lows that gets hit when you run out of VRAM, right? And then this one was fascinating to me. Black Myth Wukong, and the reason that there was no real difference in performance here is because the 8 gigabyte card had enough VRAM to satisfy the need. At 4K, it was only requiring 7.45, so it was well within what it needed. Even the 16 gigabyte card only needed 8. So you're not really needing a lot more. The other thing to observe is that even though the 8 gigabyte card in, say, 1440p only needed 6.19 gigabytes, max amount of VRAM needed throughout the benchmark run, the 16 gigabyte card used more. And it used more because there's more available. So one thing to understand is that game engines, sometimes they'll say they're using 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but they're not really using it. They've allocated it because they looked at what's available. Say you had 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and they said, I'm gonna allocate 12 of that to the game, whether you need 12 or not. So that's another thing that comes into play here that confuses the situation as well. So when you look at the 8 games that I tested, you see that there's not a huge difference. Now, there are in some games, Microsoft Flight Simulator, certainly one where there was a huge difference in performance. But overall, the 8 gigabyte model wasn't tanking your performance. Again, GPU is off the table. It's the same GPU, same performance. But it wasn't destroying your performance. It's dropping your performance, there's no question. At 1440p, you pick up 6% and 1% lows and around 7% in average FPS. Yeah, that's good. But it doesn't mean that this isn't playable, right? And that's kind of the key here. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that 8 gigabytes is what you should go for. Absolutely don't do that today. if you're gaming over 1080p, right? Like, don't do that, right? It's not smart. And I hope that GPU manufacturers would put more VRAM on. So, but this kind of notion that, I'll show you this in a moment too. But this notion that if you get 8 gigabytes of VRAM that you can't do anything is garbage, right? You really need to make sure, like I said, that it's somewhat balanced. My suggestion, I think my suggestion in the video was kind of the sweet spot that I would go for today is around 12. Now, people talk about future-proofing, right? Here's where things don't typically travel on a linear line, right? With the advent of AI, there's a lot of things that GPU manufacturers are using AI for that people are upset about, like frame gen. By the way, I don't know why people get upset. I think if game developers develop a crappy game and don't optimize it well and rely on that, I understand why people are upset about that, i.e. Borderlands 4, right? However, I think in general, it's a very, very good thing. Now, an area where AI will help us in the future, the gaming community, is it will lower our VRAM needs. And AMD and NVIDIA have already demonstrated the use of AI to significantly reduce the amount of VRAM that images on screen require, like 90%, and it's completely lossless. There is no observable difference in the image quality. So I believe the next generation of cards that comes out will come with this advanced AI feature to lower your VRAM needs, which I think is somewhat why NVIDIA was banking on lower VRAM. My guess is this has taken longer for them to develop than they had anticipated. I mean, there's also the business reasons too, because they can make more profit. Don't get me wrong, that's going to happen. But I think this drama around 8 gigabyte cards is way overblown, right? And you know, so the other thing I wanted to show you is here is Cyberpunk 2077 comparing path tracing with ray tracing. So something you may think is, hey, if you turn path tracing on, that's got to absolutely kill your performance and require significantly more VRAM. Yeah, it does require more VRAM, but not a huge amount. We're talking half a gig, 0.5 to 1 gigabytes of extra VRAM required to do path tracing. So again, that really does come down to the performance of your GPU and CPU as well, right? Because it offloads some instructions to the CPU. And then one thing I mentioned earlier was if your GPU isn't powerful enough, there's not much you can do. If you don't have enough VRAM, there are a couple of things you can do. You can use upscaling and this is just the render mode that you use. So for NVIDIA cards, DLSS, if you're using performance mode at 4K, you're rendering the graphics at 1080p. And so if you don't have enough VRAM and you want to drop your VRAM usage, but without really significantly impacting image quality, and you still want to game at 4K, you can do that. You can use DLSS upscaling and just drop your DLSS mode to a lower render resolution, and your VRAM requirements will go down. If you don't have a powerful enough GPU, there's not a heck of a lot you can do. Now, this will also help to offload onto your CPU, so that can, arguably you could do that too. So this helps in both directions, but there's things you can do. And so that's why I really do consider this to be a little bit overblown. And it's probably why I didn't promote the video very well, but it's probably why the video, when people look at it, there's no emotion in the video. It's just data. And sometimes that doesn't align with the angry emotion of, oh my God, I got screwed over because I don't have enough VRAM. What am I going to do? And there's every single day in my comments, I get people talking to me about VRAM and the need for VRAM and how their card's going to last forever because they got more VRAM. Like, dude, I shoot for what looks good today. Like in gaming today, look at the benchmarks, maybe, push that out another year and say, this is what I'm going to buy on. I'm going to buy a GPU based on my needs over today to the next year, because that's a year of gaming. You just can't future-proof this stuff, and I don't think it's worth spending a lot extra on a card with a lot more VRAM, right? I really don't. Okay, So with that said, let's see. Let me catch up on some questions here. John, okay. So your kit is a T-Force Delta. By the way, I love that's a favorite brand of mine. I really love the styling of those kits, and I've used them quite a lot. Let's see. So John has a question of whether it's useful to, if you set EXPO and then go through and write down all of your timings and then turn EXPO off and just do it manually, is there a benefit? So the answer is there should not be a benefit. However, I had a PC from Falcon Northwest at one point, and it was like a 5900X, I think. And for some unknown reason, I could not get DOCP. It was an Asus motherboard using XMP RAM. I could not get DOCP1 to be stable. And so I did turn it to manual mode and just dialed those in, and it was stable. It does not make any sense. Unless there was a setting that's not listed that it impacted, it really doesn't make any difference. So I wouldn't bother to do that. I would certainly save your profile if you get things stable. That's the other thing. When you update your BIOS, things can very easily go from stable to unstable. I've had that happen before, where a memory kit was stable and I had to add a little bit of voltage to get it stable after the BIOS update. So firmware updates through BIOS can definitely impact things. So keep that in mind, right? Let's see. Yeah, Hoplite, so it's better not to have games on a boot drive. I have everything on one Samsung Evo 4TB. So yes, the reason I would say not to put your games on the same drive as your system drive, if you can help it. You can't help it in laptops and things sometimes. So on my laptop, I have everything on one. But the reason I recommend that is that if for some reason something gets corrupted from the game, you still have a bootable system. Now, you can always run, SFC/scan now to fix your Windows system, so kind of keep that in mind. But I would always recommend to do that if you can. In a desktop, I would try and do that. And just in case something goes wrong, if you got things on separate drives, you can always, and a drive goes bad, then you don't lose everything, right? Unless your Windows drive goes bad, then you're in trouble. Let's see. Actually, I had someone in our school community, get locked out of their Windows account, and then tried to get back in, and it was a hard time. Microsoft has usually been pretty good about stuff like that, but anyway, ended up getting back in. So Tony said, yeah, it usually seems a game will use what's available, but doesn't really matter about total available to a certain point. Some game engines do that. Some game engines grab what they need. Some game engines will grab based on what's available. And that's where you'll see situations where people say, this game requires 22 gigabytes of VRAM. Well, no, you were running a 5090 or a 4090, and that's what it had available, right? So sometimes the game really does need that. And there are games out there that poorly optimized, like Indiana Jones, that does require a lot of VRAM. So bear that in mind. But if the games I tested, just in general, it's not a huge deal. There are some games, like I said, and I'll bring it up again, Microsoft Flight Simulator definitely needed that VRAM, right? I mean, if you're playing Microsoft Flight Simulator, don't run out of VRAM. That's the lesson from this chart, right? Yeah, Cody said, I don't mind frame gen if the game is built right, but sadly I think studios rely on it to make more profits. Yeah, man, it was crazy to watch the CEO of the Borderlands 4 franchise come out and just attack users because of their comments that the game runs terrible. I get it. If you've built something, it's your baby, and people are criticizing you, it doesn't feel good. So I understand it from his perspective, but man, you don't attack the audience. Like, that's not cool. And and to say that when you've got a 5090, you've got to turn DLSS and frame gen on to game well, I think you've miscalculated, and I think you didn't do a good job with your game. Like, that's the reality. Like, that's nonsensical, right? Yeah, I mean, if you're saying if you've got a 5060 and you need to turn those on to game well, I think that's reasonable, right? In a modern AAA title, I think that's reasonable. But come on, like the highest end card, that's insane. Yeah, Steven said I played some games on Cassio's last night. It was good experience on a 6600 XT Power Color Red Devil. Love Red Devils, like one of my favorite AMD brands, right? Or cards, right? John said I just didn't know if there was some automated settings or sub settings that had changed in the background. I'm not 100% sure on that. So you can go through and write them down. If you do discover that, please add it within Skool so that like I'll learn from it too, right? But I don't think so. There shouldn't be. There are some, so particularly on an Asus board, the EXPO tweaked profile certainly does go through and make some other changes, but it should be the same if you wrote them all down and then manually put them in. So, all right, let's see. Tony said he uses FrameGen a lot. Yeah, I like FrameGen. In certain games, it makes a huge difference, right? Like Black Myth Wukong, it made the game look better. Okay. And Cody wrapped up with, don't attack the gamers, we will all unite. I mean, that's just a general business thing. Don't attack your customers, right? How is that a good thing? I do not understand why any business owner would think that that's a smart move, right? Like as a YouTube creator, imagine that I went on my channel and just attacked everyone for being dumb or something. Like that's not gonna end well, is it? You do not go and attack your customers. Like that's insane. So I think that's business 101. So clearly this guy was emotional and was upset and whatever, but at that he should be taken away from Twitter and any other social media and not allowed an account, right? If you're such a child that you can't handle criticism and feedback like that, you should not have access to social media. That's basically the bottom line, right? Okay, all right, let's move on a little here. And I think all I was going to talk about next was the giveaway that's coming up. So I'm doing a build in this case, the Prism from InWin. It's a beautiful case. It has some really unique lighting so that the glass on the side you can put into basically clear mode and you can see inside the case, and then you can put into opaque mode and it looks like a wall. It's pretty cool. And I haven't built in this case yet. I've got the case just sitting over here next to me. This is going to be, it was going to be my next video. Something kind of more urgent has come up that I want to do. And then this will be the video after that. So I'm going to do a full build. The system that I've chosen, I wanted to do an affordable build. And so I bought a, what did I get? I got a Z890 Tomahawk, and I bought a 265K when they were on sale. The Tomahawk came a little scratched. I reached out to Amazon and they said, instead of returning it and replacing it, you can get $50 back on it and keep it. I'm like, fine. So that's super cheap. And then the CPU, the 265K, I purchased, I think during the Prime sale, and I got it for $200. And so I'm going to do more of an efficient build in that sense. I've got some components that InWin sent me as well that I'm going to use that I think are pretty cool. They're actually behind me. I've got a power supply. I didn't know they made power supplies, by the way. Very good quality power supplies. And I have a AIO, a 360 millimeter AIO. So you can check those out on their websites. But and then I'm going to do, once I release this video, I'm going to do a drawing and a live stream. And the winner is going to get sent one of these direct from InWin. A beautiful looking case. I love the shaping of this case, by the way. This is cool. A nice PSU shroud with some lighting, because you know it's all about the RGB. And so I think that it's got a nice GPU bracket. I'm going to put a 5070 Ti in there, I think. because it'll fill out the case well. And I've got a whole bunch of fans from InWin as well, which will be really cool. I love their cases, by the way. InWin does some super high-end, really interesting stuff. And then I also ran a poll, if you remember, this is a while back, because on top of the case, I'm going to give away a CPU, and it was overwhelming that I would give away a 9800 X3D, which I plan to do. Now, by the way, if you do win and you want a different CPU, I'll give you the list of the CPUs I have to give away, and you can choose whatever you want. So you're not locked into the 9800 X3D, but that is an option on the table. So I'll reach out to you if you win, and you can let me know. That should be, I'm going to ship that to you, so you have to cover shipping costs, but it's a small, unless you live on the other side of the planet. Even if you do, it's not going to be that expensive, but I'm just going to, if you live a long way away, I'll take it out of the box so that it's just the CPU, and it should be pretty cheap to ship. So let's see. And I also already mentioned, thank you. A couple of days ago, hit 25,000 subscribers. And it was funny. I always like taking photos of the app when I hit a number like this. And unfortunately, I hit this in the middle of the night when I was asleep. So I was a little disappointed. So I'll have to do some graphics to make it say 25,000. So that was what happened in the morning when I woke up. But again, I can't say thank you enough. Let's see. Tony, you can enter. I will put the link to the community post in this live stream video description so that you can enter that way. I'll do another post this week as well so that everyone has the link. But yeah, if you're a member of the channel, you get additional tickets basically. So anyone can enter, but if you're a member and depending on your tier, you get more tickets. So I think, like Subsonic members, I can't remember what I'd come up with, but I think they get 10 tickets or something like that, right? John asked if we have micro centers your way. I live up near New York in the US. And so I live in Connecticut actually, so there's no micro centers in Connecticut, but just over the border with New York, there's a micro center there. I love micro centers, but it's not a great place to go as a PC tech enthusiast. And it's not great because it's really hard for me to walk in and not walk out with stuff, even if the thing I'm after is not there. So I always end up walking out with a whole bunch of stuff that I probably don't need. So I try to avoid going as much as possible, right? So that's my thing, right? Let's see. Yeah, so Cody was saying I didn't realize the case had modes. It's pretty sweet. So again, I haven't built in it yet, but I saw it at CES, which is where I got to know the InWin guys, and reached out to them, said, hey, channel's going to be hitting 25K soon. Would you like to sponsor a giveaway? And they jumped on it. They were fantastic to work with. There's companies out there that are not fun to work with, that make great products, but they're just not cool to work with, right? Tony, I did not know he was the same guy who lost a company drive and wow, that's embarrassing. Yeah, that's interesting. So clearly the guy, he might be kind of one of those weird geniuses that's really smart, but everyone else is dumb, Can't stand those guys. Always thinks they're the smartest person in the room. I dealt with a lot of people like that over my career. But yeah, not cool. Yeah, Tony, I was going to ask you, because you put that in school that you went there. I was going to ask you how you went. But yeah, if you probably bringing your wife with you is a very smart way to avoid spending money. If I bring my daughter, she's just going to encourage me to buy stuff and then buy stuff for her. But yeah, probably bringing my wife will help. So, that's, the real reason why I started this channel is that so I can spend money on tech without getting, so much. I can just say, it's for the channel. I'm sorry, I got to get it. But yeah. Yeah, man, micro centers are just, it's like a little kid in a candy store when I go. It's always so cool. Like, I remember there's an event up in Boston, and I went to the micro center on the way back there. and bought a bunch of stuff, and then it's just it's hard to walk around and see all the tech sitting on the shelf and not, I'll go there and I'm like, what do I need? I've already got like 7 motherboards that I haven't built things on. I don't need an 8th, right? Same thing with power supplies. I got a bunch. In fact, I should at the next live stream. How would I do that? I gotta show my closet full of tech at some point, because I've got it all organized on all different shelves, all the AIOs, motherboards, graphics cards. I just reorganized my GPU area because it was getting overflowed, and took all of the last gen cards and moved them downstairs into storage and just have the current gen ones there. Lots. I got CPUs, I got SSDs, memory. I got so many memory kits. It's crazy. In fact, on Skool, I just sent out I sent out a 14900 KF and a 13900 KS to 2 of my members. One of them had a problem with his Raptor Lake chip, and the other one was the first person to sign up to Skool, and I think he had a 14600K. So I just reached out to him and said, hey, I've got a spare 14900 KF. Do you want it? Right. So that's good. I'm always happy to give back to the community where I can. I don't need extra Raptor Lake CPUs. I've already got the ones I need. So I'm always happy to do that. Tony, just cooped up some fans, always can use thermal paste and fans. I've got a whole thing full of fans. I think because of my background in aerospace and things, I just love cooling stuff. So way too many fans. But let's see. Hoplite lives in Central America and would love to visit a micro center. Yeah. I don't know. Micro center really is one of the only chains that is growing, which is good for our, I guess, community, right? Since it's one of the only chains that is building new places. Most of them are shrinking. Most of the retail places, right? Physical retail stores, because of Amazon and Newegg and other places. But yeah, it's a pretty sweet place. The other thing is that we've got CES coming up at the start of the year. That's in Las Vegas. If you love tech and don't have anything going on that week, definitely come up there. And if you do come up there, please reach out to me. I'd love to catch up and say hi. I'm going to be spending my time at the booth, and I'll record footage. I'll probably upload that onto Skool because it won't be clean footage, right? I won't have time while I'm there to edit it all. I'll do some community posts and other things, just show you some of the cool stuff I see. But it is really, really cool to see all the latest and greatest stuff. I'm going to work on some of the relationships with some of the companies that I like, that are ethical, that are there as well, and make sure that I, at least now that the channel is large enough, I want to try and get access to some tech faster. That's one of the problems of not getting sent samples, is that you end up having to wait weeks. For example, GPUs, NVIDIA GPUs, just to buy a 50 series GPU at launch at a reasonable price was really, really tough. I way overpaid for a 5090 FE, right? So somewhat regret that, but nonetheless, it's for the channel, right? So anyway, okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'll just say again, truly, truly heartfelt, the support that you've given the channel and myself. I really, really greatly appreciate it. When you make content and you release it and then you get a really good response, I mean, it's a great feeling, right? Because and I try and make content that I would want to watch, because I'm one of you, right? I'm a PC tech enthusiast. I'm a gamer. And so I always try to think, what's the question that I have on my mind? Like, what would I really like answered? There's lots of things that are out there that people don't give a good explanation around. And that's why I've done tuning and optimization guides, because for a long time I had no idea how to do it, because no one does it. Very few people do it. And then when you do find a channel that does do it, you'd look through and it's like, what the hell is this garbage? And I'm an engineer, and I understand technical things, but they clearly don't know what they're doing because their explanation is incredibly difficult to understand. And so, that's why I'm making guides, and I'm making them hopefully as simple and easy to use as possible. Because the reality is that I don't want to be the only person doing it. I want everyone within the community to be able to extract max performance, or whatever your objective is, max efficiency, balance, whatever it may be. I want you to be able to do that and come to a source that you can trust. So that's my objective. So hopefully, we keep growing rapidly and really make an impact on the broader community. And we're starting to do that. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all of the support. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Hopefully you enjoyed the live stream today. New video next Friday, and there'll probably be another one the following Friday after that, because I'm working on it now. And then I'll do the build. We'll do a drawing and see who wins that as well. So if you want to chat more and do live Q&A, join our Skool community. We did a live Q&A last week. I'm going to start doing some education kind of one-on-one, or not one-on-ones, but education lives that are going to cover lots of different topics as well. So if you're interested, come join the community. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful